Hey, welcome to Thru Port Collective. And we've been off for a couple weeks, but we're back. It's great to see everybody. And we've been having a fun conversation already in the chat. And thankfully, my voice has returned, so I'll actually get to talk a little bit this week. But I had some spinal surgery in my neck, and everything went really well. So appreciate everybody's kind comments and the messages that you sent. But onwards and forwards, I'm Cryss, and I'm here with my partners, Marshall and Tim. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, been looking forward to chatting with you guys.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's glad to see that you got your voice back and you're feeling better, man.
Yeah, you guys had a great show. What was it, 2 weeks ago with Andy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yep.
I ended up being a really popular show too. So if anybody hasn't seen it, be sure to go back and check it out. It was with Andy Joyce, Synthetic, and it was all about really neat and unusual MIDI and CV control devices, and that was fun. So we had NAMM this last week, and it could have slipped by almost without notice. It was a little bit odd this time, and normally we've had Winter NAMM in Anaheim, that's Southern California, and that's usually been kind of the bigger show. And then there's always been Summer NAMM as well, which for a while I guess has been in Nashville, if I recall. And so during COVID, that kind of changed things. And then last year, I went to NAMM, and it was in Anaheim, but it was in June. And so now it's April, and I think, if I recall correctly, I had looked it up before, that the next NAMM will be in January again in Anaheim. So I don't know if they're going back to the normal schedule. Do you know if there's going to be a Summer NAMM next year?
I don't think so. Not there might be here. I know that the LA, they said they were going back to January. So I think that's part of why it was a little bit of a dud too, is just releases were on different schedules and people were on different schedules, and I don't think the April version was as well attended.
Yeah.
I think that was a part of the issue too, right? Some pretty big vendors never showed up for this one.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, it was a little bit smaller this year than even last year. And when I went last year, I've been to quite a few NAMMs, like from maybe the mid or late 90s, definitely by the late 90s, like kind of onward. And it was kind of small in comparison. And I guess this year was even worse. But last year, I know I was looking for some of the major manufacturers, and they were all gone. No Fender, no Gibson, no Roland. Big. Some of the big companies gone, and I guess this year it's kind of been the same. But I don't know. So, you guys, like, what was there anything interesting of these NAMM, or at least NAMM time releases for you guys? Was there anything that popped out at you?
The only thing I saw that I thought was kind of cool, that I actually heard about it before NAMM anyway, was the Polyend Mini Tracker.
Mm-hmm.
So they released a smaller battery-powered version of the tracker. I think it runs the same software and everything on it, but it's got more memory for sample storage and things like that. And it looks almost like a little Game Boy kind of thing. That was just kind of the only thing I saw that was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Otherwise, there wasn't much to really drool over this year. So.
Yeah, I saw where they had the Polyend Tracker Mini. There's a couple things I thought were cool.
Yeah, there you go. You got it, Cryss.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Yeah, that seemed to be a really popular item right there.
Just having it be battery powered, I think, is pretty cool, because the other one you have to plug it into a power source. So having that kind of be a portable device is, I think, pretty neat. I think the only thing it's missing the the original tracker has like a grid of buttons on it and a scroll wheel. So they obviously needed to consolidate some things, but yeah, I think that the form factor and the design of that looks pretty cool.
Mm.
And the interesting thing is it costs the same as the regular of the full size tracker, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So $6.99 US. Seems a little expensive, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, you think they could get it down under 5, but
Yeah.
So this would be like.
Yeah, and Wagyu says it's missing the FM radio too. Yeah.
well,
Is this? Would you say is like making electronic music almost like a portable DAW or something?
Yeah, it's a tracker style DAW basically. I guess you could refer to it that way. You can sample into it and create full compositions in there.
it's sort of like a version of Ableton, right? Of Live. I like it, in a way, in style. Clip launching.
Kind of in terms of like how you can. I guess there's kind of like little clip things in there, but it's not.
Yeah, clip launching.
Well, I don't know that it. I don't know that you can launch the clips, and but I think each one of those little blocks there on the screen is like a section of tracker. A certain number of steps in the tracker, and then you build your song that way. That's actually how I started making music, was in trackers back in the day. So I'm pretty familiar with that workflow. I would say it's not really Ableton like, but in terms that you can create a track in this, I would consider it a DAW, but it's not Ableton, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this would be a little more marketed towards like MIDI samples, electronic musicians. Is this able to record? Are you able to record other instruments into it?
Yeah, you can sample stuff into it.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
What else are you going to see?
Maybe a little pricey.
One thing that I saw. Let's see if we can find them. Yeah, here. So UAD put out a few pedals last year, a couple years ago, something like that, and pictured here. And so what they've been doing is been taking some of their algorithms that they've already developed for plugins and putting them into pedals. So some of the older ones are like this Astro modulation machine. So you get like a CE1 chorus and a phase 90 and, not like a lexicon reverb, and memory man in these different pedals. And these are amps, and they've come out with a few more, which have some nice features for pedals, like stereo ins and stereo outs. Which it seems like a lot of pedals omit the stereo in. So if you have a chain of stereo effects, you kind of get screwed on that because some of them don't have the stereo in. So that's kind of nice. And they've done some new ones like this they've got the compressor, which is the max pedal, the Delverb, which is a reverb and delay, but it's kind of stripped down features from their other pedals, and the Galaxy, which, as it alludes to, would be the Roland Space Echo in a pedal, which would be from their algorithms from their plugins. But they look kind of interesting, although, to be honest, like as I was thinking about my own rig, I don't really need any of these new ones, but I have been kind of eyeing the Golden Reverb, which is like it has a, spring reverb, like a Blackface Fender amp, spring reverb, a plate reverb, the 140, and of course a Hall and a few other things from the Lexicon stuff. But looks pretty nice to me. But I guess you guys don't.
Can you buy these standalone?
What's that?
Can you buy these plugins by themselves, or do you have to subscribe to some service or anything?
Oh, these are pedals, but they're built off the algorithms from their plugins.
Oh, these are
Now-
hardware. Okay.
Yeah, these are hardware. Yeah,
I didn't know UAD made hardware. Like hardware.
yeah. Actually, well, a lot of their stuff is marketed more for guitar players.
Okay.
So they do some other things that are again more, like they have their aux, which is for running your amp into, and it has IRs for speakers and things like that. But yeah, these are built off of their the normal Universal Audio plugins. But something that they have done recently is they did offer their Spark subscription, but their plugins were always tied to hardware before that. And they have since come out where you can buy native versions of their plugins without having to have like an Apollo or any of their hardware.
Oh, that's
so
good.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
They are expensive though. Not so bad, I guess, if you're willing to shell out like $1,100 or something, you can pick them up. The amount of money per plugin's not too bad, but yeah, if you're buying them, even singles on sale are like $100, so they're a little expensive. Let me put this down here.
And Tim, you said you had a few things that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, there was Icon has a new control surface out for, I think it works at most of the major DAWs. That looked pretty cool. There it is. Let's see. The
You
V1.
grabbing it to pop it up?
Yeah, I'll do that. Let's see if the V1, I think it's called. Looks pretty cool. I'm going to share it here. Datar. Okay. And it's got like it's got a center module there, and then it has like little expansion controllers you can add to it. So I think you can, depending on the DAW, I think you can get up to 64 channels. And it's cool because it's got like a touchscreen area there. It's got like 8 banks of whatever that is, 10 or 12 or whatever. So you can control plug-ins and, automation and keystrokes and all kinds of whatnots on it, which is just great. Like, if you're not the kind of person that loves to mouse around, which I'm not really. I'd much rather have a tactile surface. So it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it looks cool too.
Yeah, so they have that out. I thought that was cool. And the other thing that I saw that was interesting, that it's called the Freak Tube. Let me see if I can find that. It looks really interesting. It's basically, it's by a company called what were they called? Freak Tube, and it's basically four tubes in an outboard box that's connectivity to your DAW via USB, and then it has 4 actual tubes inside of it, and so you can run your plugins right through and get actual tube saturation and warmth, and then run it back into the computer. It's really pretty cool, and it saves the presets and whatever various tweak levels you have on its controls, saves it in the preset memory of whatever the plugin is. Let's see if
That's pretty cool.
I thought that was really cool, and the demo of it sounded pretty awesome as well. Let me see if I can find that right quick, because, man, it was cool. I should have brought that up, but let's see if they'll show it. Just give me a nice picture. Yeah, I mean, this will work. It gets the point across.
Also, friends in the chat, let us know what looked good to you from NAMM or any of those recent releases.
Okay,
What did you guys think of the Sound Toys Super Plate?
So there it is. It's the FT1. Yeah, pretty cool. Like it's an outboard piece of gear that has actual tubes in it. So anything that you wanted to add tube warmth to, you could do that, and then it routes it right back into the DAW and saves the presets with the plugin. I thought that was like pretty badass.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think there's a newer one called the FC one. This looks like it was last year. Yeah, so that's last year. So it's been around for a year, but it's news to me, and I just thought that's a really clever idea. Like, what a cool thing. I would dig that just as a mixer and whatnot. From that perspective, just to like have actual tubes at my disposal. Pretty great.
Did you know? Does it have any sort of audio inputs on it that you could use it without the plugin?
That's a great question. I don't think it does, but that's a great question. That would make a big difference in its versatility, obviously. I know you can break the 4 different tubes out into, either 2 pair of stereo or, 4 mono or 1 stereo and then 2 mono, however you want to configure it in those combinations. So that's pretty groovy, but I don't know if it has actual like analog inputs. Well, that would be wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, they should do that. Cryss, you should tell them.
Yeah.
Tell them to get right on that. Okay. But yeah, that's it. Those are kind of the 2 things I saw. There's a couple other things that Imperfect Aaron in the chat was mentioning that IntelliGel has a new large desktop semi-modular synth out called Cascadia.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
I saw that. That looks kind of cool. It looked a little spanky on the bank account, but I mean, it was like $2,200, I think. So, for what it is, I don't know what all it had on it. It looked pretty great, and their stuff sounds good. I do have an IntelliGel Atlantis semi-modular. It's like a full synth voice module, and it sounds cool. It's in my Euro rack.
Yeah, I can show the Cascadia here.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. So
it looks kind of ARP 2600-ish.
Well, yeah, the IntelliGel that I have is the Atlantis. It also uses sliders rather than rotary knobs. Yeah. So that does, and especially with the gray, that's really giving it the 2600 vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you guys do this or the Synthex? What's the brand on that one?
Oh, right.
The name is escaping me. I've got them in.
Yeah, same here. I know what you're talking about.
Pull out my Euro rack to remember what the brand name is.
Centrix?
Erica Synths.
Oh, Erica Synths. Yeah.
Yeah. Centrix, is that what it is? Or I think Synthex,
so.
But I mean Centrix, yeah.
Yeah. That's what Wagu's saying is probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw.
There's 2 versions of them. They had the first one was cream with the speakers, and they did a version 2 recently that looked pretty cool.
Oh, I didn't know that. I remember the original one with the speakers. Oh, here it is. I'll show this off again.
Yeah, it's got I think this one's blackface, right? Yeah. And it's got the nice weighted VU on there. I'm like, oh yeah, come on. It looks like, anything that looks like it's from the late 50s, I'm already sucked in.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
I mean, let me see if I can zoom in on that a little more. That's pretty cool looking.
I think it's pretty wild. There's a guy that whose Instagram channel or whatever page rather I follow, and he's got one. He's been just doing some demos, and it's pretty wild. Like it does some pretty out there kinds of things. So I don't know how versatile it is in terms of like if you're just trying to do some sort of production that's more down the middle, but if you're just into having a great time, I think that I think you can make Star Trek sounds on it, Aaron.
Good.
Yeah. I mean that's important.
It seems like a kind of a fun science experiment box.
I think it looks way better in the black without the speakers on it too.
Yeah. It's awesome. To reiterate, the first version had the speakers, which I don't know. I get why they did it, but it seems like kind of a useless contraption to me. I'd rather plug it into my system. So the second one I thought had a better feature set in that regard. But yeah, I've heard people making music on them that's pretty fun.
I'd assume it's just sort of the same idea as like having an easel, like a Buchla easel or something. It's just that kind of self-contained, kind of probably self-generative device. It'd be a lot of fun to goof with.
Let me put this up since we've had some talk about it in the chat already. But Sound Toys, for the first time in like 8 years or something, have introduced a new plugin. Although it'll be out next month, I guess. Super Plate. So they've had their other smaller plate reverb, but this is looking nice and a much more modern display for it versus their other plugins. Kind of worried about these guys. They can make it.
Yeah, I've got the little plate, which is like just super basic, but it sounds cool. It doesn't have any pre-modulation or pre-delay or any. I mean, it has no real controls on it other than the decay time. But man, they make great sounding stuff. I use Sound Toys plugs all the time. They're so good, but it's a little boring once you kind of like, all right, it's been 10 years or whatever, Yeah. Could we get some new, at least, like, could we get some new presets even or something? Like, update it.
I've only got 2 of their plugins. I've got the Phase Shifter, which, again, sounds amazing, and I can't remember what the other one I have. I think it was a freebie, like Radiator or something.
Yeah.
But that Phase Shifter is awesome, and you can go through and tweak it, but my gosh, when you're looking at it's not sizable, it's low resolution, it looks like it was done in I don't know when it was done, but it looks like 15 years ago. I'm like, I don't really want to look at this to do my
they just sound they sound so good. Echo Boy sounds amazing. Decapitator sounds amazing. I love Crystallizer, which is sort of a granular effects thing they make. I mean, all of them are super cool, but they just have fallen behind in the update department completely.
Yeah, I'd be interested in their whole set of stuff, when they do a sale or something. But I think a lot of people were looking for their Sound Toys Volume 6 and not 5.4. But hopefully this is a small sign of good things to come. I'm curious, how much do you guys use plate reverb, or what are your thoughts on it?
I don't. I use an Art Acoustic reverb, and that's pretty much what I use on everything. So I have that Plate 140 that was released as a free plugin by was that Arturia? I can't remember who put that out, but I don't know much about some of these other plugin companies, really. I don't delve too much into these. I use the stock delays and stuff in Ableton. Stock compressor.
First of all, 2 things, like good for you and how boring.
Right. Yeah. But I'm looking at the prices on these Sound Toys, man. These are not cheap plugins.
No, but they are killer.
Yeah.
They are so good, man. They're just like, I got the whole set, like, I don't know, a number of years ago. And they keep me pretty involved. They're pretty great. And you can definitely there's a second layer, a more tweak head page where you can really get into some great stuff. But plate reverbs. I love plates. Plates are fun to mess with, man.
Yeah.
I've got, so obviously, like, there's this one, but I've got the Abbey Road collection of plates where they emulate there's like 3 different settings, I believe, 3 different plates, depending on which studio they're in. Those are pretty fun. They're pretty great, useful. I think I use plates or obviously Hall or anything of that nature, Room, probably more than I do Spring. Spring is the thing I probably use the most sparingly. What about you guys?
Yeah, Spring, Spring to me is like a surf guitar and things like that. And so when I hear, I don't really care for it all on synthesizer. That maybe the 2600 will change my mind when I get that going. Fortunately, like mine has the full size, whatever it was, 17-inch reverb tank like they would put in a Fender amp. So maybe I'll think that's cool, but it's kind of weird hearing spring reverb on synthesizers unless you're making like really eclectic music. And for vocals and drums and things like that, it has a unique sound, and to me, it's like it's a guitar thing. It's got to be splashy and surfy, and there's some really cool spring reverbs like that. But I don't think of it in terms of like studio use, like you would a plate. So yeah, I mean, I love plates. Came to plates a little bit later in the game because as a guitar player, you're always introduced to spring reverb first. And I didn't buy a reverb pedal for quite a while because I've got one in my amp. But then when I started playing a lot of like old Fender Bandmasters and things like that, which didn't have reverb, then I started getting more into reverb pedals and like, what's this plate setting on here? And then, later on reading that a lot of my favorite albums were made with plate reverbs like Dark Side of the Moon. It's like, what reverbs do you have? We just have this plate reverb. Okay, let's just use that a lot.
Right.
Well, it's usually that or chambers, like at Abbey Roads, they would have had the chambers they would have used. But but now, I mean, I love plate reverbs. In fact, on my one of my pedal boards, I have a Strymon Flint, and I'm usually in the plate setting on that. But in the computer, then there's of course lots of options, and I think. Well, yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of plate reverbs, and I enjoy going through them and trying to find the one that I'm going to enjoy the most at the moment. But yeah, a lot of plates and a lot of hall reverbs and room when it needs it too. But I don't know, reverb's one of those things that it's always, it's like certain things like, okay, I've got this tool, it does what I need to do. I'm pretty boring when it comes to equalizers, and it's like I know how to use these, and I'm gonna keep using them. Just like what Marshall was saying, like you use a tool, you get to know a tool really well. It's helpful to keep using it rather than just to keep cycling through different things. But reverb would be one of those things I'm just a sucker for. That I like. I want to hear a different reverb, and what does this one sound like? So,
yeah, I think for me, I found that Art Acoustic plugin, and I just really like the way it sounds, and so I just use that.
Yeah.
I think I have a Waves reverb, the H verb, but I don't really use that one that much. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't delved too much into the third-party effects plugins for that kind of stuff. For just basic like reverbs, delays, and stuff, I'm good with what I have. I think.
Well, I mean, for a lot of these effects, I mean, what comes with a DAW these days is pretty impressive.
It's pretty good, yeah.
That's true.
And actually, I will use the RV7000 from Reason sometimes. Since they took my advice, I'm sure they listened to me years ago when I told them to release their stuff as plugins, so that you can use them in other DAWs. Because I like the reverb in that and Reason, the RV7000, and I like their like scream distortion effect. And that was just kind of crappy because it was locked away in their little ecosystem, and when you move to a real DAW, you can't use it. But they a couple of years ago they released their stuff as like a standalone plugin that you can use their effects and stuff and put them in your workflow. And so I do use the RV7000 sometimes, and I think it's got gated reverb and it's got hall room plate. I think there's plates in there too, but yeah.
Nice.
I remember. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to tell a quick little anecdotal story. I bought back in the day where I had my 8-track reel-to-reel machine, a Tascam, and I was looking to get some reverb going for it. So this would have been like probably early 80s. and digital reverbs were just kind of coming out, and they were still kind of expensive. MIDI Verb hadn't come out yet, which was like a big crazy thing when that came out. Just super inexpensive and sounded really pretty cool, digital. But yeah, so anyway, I bought this kit for a plate reverb, and it was called the Blue Plate Special. That was the name of the kit. And it was, it's a big metal frame with a 4x8 sheet of, sheet metal in there. And then you had to buy transducers and then build a box around it and then find a place to put it. So being that, and that was my intention, I was going to put it up in the attic and have an actual plate. But being that all the digital reverbs are starting to come out right then, and so before I really got my scene together about building a box for it and all of that, I just kind of let it go because obviously here came all these digital verbs and they were like the latest, greatest thing, right? So anyway, the Blue Plate Special was never completed. Just a funny moment, where the two different technologies were passing.
Totally, yeah. On topic with our subject today, I remember like when I started getting into really getting into digital recording and using Logic and stuff, and started poking around like, oh, I need some reverb, and I was was gonna go grab a reverb pedal or something, and started digging around into Logic plugins like, oh, there's these reverb plugins, and pull them open, and they're convolution reverbs that had these huge halls and really long decay, beautiful sounds, and coming from pedal reverbs, which these days are very sophisticated and are no different, but back in the day, like all of a sudden I was just exposed to these really huge reverbs, and I was like mind blown, like, oh, this is fantastic. And then I started using really long reverbs on a lot of stuff, more things than I should have, but but you have to for a little while, you're like, you're so into it. Well, speaking of reverbs too, I want to show one. So maybe more known to guitar players, there's a guitar amp company called Benson from, I think they're in Portland, that make really amazing sounding tube amplifiers, like handmade, just made as well as you can make them, and just incredible sounding. In fact, I was borrowing that little head that was sitting here on the desk for quite a while. It was a Benson. And this company Mixwave has done, let's see here, pull this up really quick here. They've done a plug-in version of one of their amplifiers, plus has a bunch of their pedals in that package, and a spring reverb, which is, again, based on the hardware. But this week, or for NAMM, they introduced this, which is the Benson Studio Tallbird spring reverb. And so it's again based on a hardware unit that is it's a twin tank, each tank having 3 spring long tank reverbs. So none of the little small things like on the Behringer 2600. It's a full deal, but it's voiced for again for using in the studio, but it's a spring reverb. And so I thought it was kind of an interesting idea. I mean, again, just from what I said, like I don't really go to spring reverbs for studio use, but I picked this up for $39, and it's really nice sounding. I'm not sure how much I'm going to use it. Like, oh, let me slap it on some vocals or something. I kind of doubt that I will, but I'll try. But it actually sounds really nice on guitars and synthesizers. So that was a kind of a nice one, and it's got. Cool. Versus most spring reverbs, it does give you a little more control. So input will control how hard you drive the tank, which would correspond to the dwell controls on old Fender standalone tanks, which means the decay time, like both how kind of springy it will be, and also how long it decays, plus some tone controls, and of course the outputs, the mix. And they give you some other things, and you can choose between a short and long tanks. I guess they modeled it with 2 different two different styles. But if you're into guitar and synth, it's kind of a cool one to take a look at. I thought it sounded pretty good.
Cool. I like spring reverb. I mean, just for the like quirkiness of it. So everything's not in the same space. If something's got a spring on it, it's kind of like, whoa, that's cool. But that's an old school thought for sure, right? Just to even the thing. I love it. Honestly, I really like the sound of the spring verb in Grandmother, of the Moog Grandmother. I think it sounds cool. You guys familiar with that?
It has a different vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah, it takes it somewhere that works.
I forgot that had a spring reverb in it, to be honest with you.
It's so cool.
The only experience I've ever had with a real spring reverb is what's in the ARP 2600. So, and I think I don't know if I like it that much, to be honest with you. I think I like using other reverbs.
Yeah, it depends on the production style, right? You're going for sure. Yeah. If you're trying to do like an indie thing that's sort of old and sort of new sounding, it's great. Mm-hmm.
I think also kind of what you put into it makes a big difference. Like if you're putting in really slow attack string pads, like, I don't know, spring reverb doesn't work that well for that. I think it's just not the right thing. But
no,
if you're putting in like, really fast arpeggiated plucks or something that's more percussive, then you get that kind of character out of the spring where it has that like real springy splash to it, like a bing bing kind of thing going on with it.
Yeah, the sproing.
Well, in another conversation, this would sound rather funny.
That's what I thought. I was about to respond to that, and I thought, well, okay. Culture of Coach, you're being hilarious.
If you guys haven't checked out this one, like Audio Things Springs is probably my favorite spring reverb plugin. It has a ton of different type of spring types, including some really crazy studio ones, and it can get really splashy or really subtle. But there's some funky ones like the old like Japanese hi-fi spring reverbs that you'd stick on your hi-fi system, things like that. It has a lot of unusual ones, plus some normal ones too.
That's awesome.
I've got one more, but do you guys have any others from NAMM?
Nah.
Well, I mean, there just wasn't a whole lot there that was even there. I mean, so many people weren't even there, and then not very exciting. Drum Workshop wasn't there. I was hoping that they would do something interesting. Because I've been an endorser for them since 1991, and like I thought they just partnered up with Roland, which cue the laughter. Because they're not really so Drum Workshop, if you don't know them as a drum company, they're way known for their innovative products and for custom built drums. They're super fantastic, amazing, built-in USA drums. And
they sound amazing.
They're incredible, and the technology that they have for their hardware has been, even guys that play other drums, they'll oftentimes use DW hardware because it's just the coolest, best engineered, most innovative stuff. Well, they partnered up. Well, Roland essentially kind of bought them, I guess. So I thought maybe that they would show something interesting of how they're going to bring this acoustic drum company together with Roland, who has not been innovative in a long time.
Yeah.
So, but neither one of them, I don't think, were there. I know Roland wasn't there.
Yeah, and that's surprising to me because they go to everything.
Yeah. Well, last one. I shared this with the group. It's the T-Rex Benson Echo Rec magnetic disc delay. So T-Rex, I don't know how much they get around in the synth world, but they're a well-known guitar company. What are they, like Danish or something? I can't remember. But they've been around for years and years making guitar pedals, and they did some years back make a tape delay machine, a modern tape delay machine. There's not that many people making modern tape units, but they had one. I think they may have even done it as a Euro rack too. I don't remember, but their big surprise
cool.
was I guess they had spent 5 years recreating the Benson Echarec. Now, for those that means nothing to, the Benson Echarec was a vacuum tube powered delay unit that, instead of well before bucket brigade devices, well before digital delay, and during the time of the tape delay era, this was kind of an alternative to tape delay, and it was magnetic drum delay. And so that center section there spins, and it has, it reads and writes off of that drum, and it's like a metal wire drum, I guess. And so that has a very particular sound, and the original Benson Echarecs were used, probably the most famous users of it were Pink Floyd, particularly David Gilmour, used on things like Echoes, One of These Days, the bass guitar that starts One of These Days is being fed through an Echo Rec, and it's got kind of it's like a tape, similar in sound, somewhere between like a tape delay and an analog delay, bucket brigade delay, but it's got a lot of modulation to it. And so there's, trying to get a hold of an Echo Rec and maintaining it and stuff has been a pretty big deal to try to find this stuff. But it's kind of interesting that T-Rex has taken it on in mass production, I guess.
I think it's fantastic. It's exciting to me. I'd love to have one of those.
Yeah, they're cool. Unfortunately, in the United States, they're a lot more expensive than they are in Europe, I guess. They're listing a lot higher. So $2,100 at Sweetwater. Now, I should have pulled it up, but on my YouTube channel, Synthiate Sound, they're from, I don't know, a year or two ago. One of my buddies bought a new Benson Echarec 2, and it was made by this guy Marcello, who was an employee of Benson back in the day. Benson was Italian, and so he bought up machines and parts and stuff from the old Echarecs and started making new production units, and they look amazing. They're really way cooler than this looks. And they had come in like solid state or vacuum tube versions, and my buddy bought one. He got serial number 2, and serial number 1 was owned by John Mayer. So there were only 2 of them in the United States at the point that he bought it. And so he brought it over, and we did a quick video on it. So I played guitar through it, and it was just like, oh, so good sounding. It was like probably the best, coolest sounding delay I've ever heard. But it's interesting that T-Rex has taken on this, and let's be curious to see how this turns out.
Yeah, I'd love to have one. $2,100, no, but but I mean, the tone of them is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the tape delays have gone up in price too, and Full Tone is now out of business, which were probably the guys that brought it back, because they had their tube tape echo and their solid state tape echo, which are both really good sounding. I really like their solid state one, like an EP3. But Full Tone has just finally ended this last year. But yeah, there's some other companies making tape delays, but not, again, magnetic drum ones are kind of unusual. I guess if it took a company like T-Rex 5 years to develop it, it's not an easy task.
And then look at the price tag. It's like,
yeah. But the tape delays, the modern tape delays are pretty expensive like that too. So
are they?
Yeah. Now, whether they're or not, they're worth it for somebody. It's like I wouldn't want to go out gigging with that. I would just take, like something like the Strymon Volant or something.
Studio gear for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, well, hopefully NAMM will be a little bit more fun in January. Guess we'll have to see how it goes.
not too high of a bar to set there, I don't think.
I mean, it's
No.
normally though, like you see new product launches towards the end of the year for people to buy for the holidays. So I think Winter NAMM was always the better of the shows anyway
Hmm.
for that stuff. You know, at least for synths and the stuff
Yeah,
I'd be kind of into.
definitely
Yeah.
for guitars. Like guitars, it always seemed like it was better in the January winter NAMM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the, the 600-pound gorilla in the room is the NAMM show dying, though.
Mm.
But I could just due to any type of brick and mortar type display, and is it worth them to do that when they have so many other ways to, companies have so many other ways to exploit their new products and get them out there, and rather than take a week out of, sales to go down there and hang out, and, just wonder if it's also suffering from that.
I've heard it's become a lot more expensive to exhibit also.
Well, that would make sense.
So,
I guess
small
time will tell.
companies.
I like the conventions though. I like, and the ones over in Europe seem to be fine, right? Like Super Booth and all those.
Mhm.
So
They're
That's
probably
true.
doing it a lot cheaper though, because
are
some of
they?
the places that they're renting out. I mean, NAMM is renting out the Anaheim Convention Center, which is a really nice place.
We'll
used
put
to
it
do it
in
at
a
the LA
Holiday Inn
Convention
next
Center.
time.
Do it in the Evergreen Ballroom.
Yeah. Come on, guys. You can put some off there.
I mean,
Well,
I'm
yeah.
with you, Marshall. I love conventions like that. I think it's
Yeah.
interaction that you don't get any other way, man, and that's really fun, and it's like something to put on your calendar and go do.
But I like hearing, about all the stuff kind of at once, and it's because and I think it actually gives smaller companies a little bit better of a chance to get stuff out there and known when it's
Yeah.
released at a convention. The big companies, they're going to have a platform to announce their stuff anyway, but I think the smaller guys definitely benefit from those conventions,
That's another
especially if
good
they've got a
point.
wicked piece of gear coming out,
Yeah.
because all the press
Yeah.
is there already, and yeah, I just think it'd be a shame if we see these go away.
I remember.
Well, hopefully that's not the deal.
I remember when I first started going to them in the '90s that it was fun. I mean, it was pretty amazing to walk through like a major exhibitor and see everything that they had, like Fender guitars or something. Like, oh yeah, wow. But it wasn't really the thing that got me really excited. It was always when they moved it. At least when they moved it to the Anaheim Convention Center. I don't remember if I know I went to the LA one, but I don't really. It's so long ago. But definitely by the time they moved it to Anaheim, they would have the downstairs room be like really small booths and a whole bunch of like startup companies, and that ended up always being like the most interesting place to go because you would see stuff you couldn't see in stores, and even back in the 90s or 2000s that where there were lots of music stores around, especially compared to now, there was still a lot of things that you couldn't play or you couldn't touch or you couldn't see. And so NAMM, if you could get in, was one of the fun things to do, was to go and play the gear that you weren't able to play before you made an online purchase or something. Like you could see them and actually talk to the guys that invented the gear, and that was a lot of fun talking to the people who made the product. And to be honest, I enjoyed that last year with NAMM. And the same thing, playing the OBX8, talking to Tom Oberheim, which was amazing. Playing all the other cool synthesizers that were coming out, like the Third Wave. Talking to Glenn and Ken at Hydrosynth booth, ASM, stuff like that, where you get to see cool stuff, talk to cool people. Played I played 2 original Mellotrons last year, which was like bucket list, things like that. Where if these shows shut down, but I kind of agree with you guys. Like if some of these other shows, like what were Super Booth, Synthplex, KnobCon, these different shows in Europe and the U.S. keep going. At least there's somewhere, at least as far as electronic instruments, that you can go and check this stuff out. I don't know what's going to mean for drums and guitars, but at least for that corner of the market.
Yeah, and it's not really a great place to go and try to check out drums. That's funny. I mean, you can kind of check out some stuff like that, but it's such a zoo in there, and it's so loud, and as you can imagine, the drum area is just cacophonous. So it's like, all right, we can get a look at it firsthand, which is nice, but you can't really. I mean, you're not going to get much out of playing it.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about evolution of our gear and how it's kind of affected what we do. And we've already hit on it a little bit today, and felt like it was a good time to do it since we were talking about gear anyways with NAMM. That I thought it may be kind of interesting because it's been kind of a thread through our conversations about how things have evolved. And not just to say like, hey, I use this and now I use this, but to really talk about the more abstract part of it, like how has it changed us? How has it changed us as musicians? What have been the benefits of the evolution of our gear? What have been some of the fallbacks or things that have made things tougher? And I don't even know, like, how should we start this? Like, where should we go first?
Man, I mean, how about just like technology that helps you learn music and what there is out now, because that has completely changed so many people's not only workflow, but production amount, like how much they can get out. Get deeply philosophical, please. What, like we don't normally? Like that's a change? Come on.
To be or to be flat.
Oh yes. But you can. There's so much technology that's out there right now that can help you, for instance, learn how to play a guitar riff or something, if you're just a beginner, and it was not out there before. So
gosh, yeah.
So I'm just thinking about all the ways in which that can streamline your learning process and your learning curve. That's kind of one of the first things that pops off in my brain is like being really different from when I was trying to learn how to play an instrument. So if that's acceptable for the subject, let's talk about that.
Absolutely. So Tim, how did you do it when you first started playing? Like, what were the resources that were available?
In my household, we had when I was a kid and still living at home, obviously. In my household, we had a reel-to-reel machine, we had a Sony stereo deck, and then we had a turntable. And so I would basically, what I found most effective, you could slow down the tape machine, but it would slow down by, like half speed or something. If it was 7.5 IPS, then you could go down to whatever it was, 3 3/4, I guess it was. And so, you could tell a little bit about what was happening, but of course, the pitch is all shifted down and everything's super muddy and there was no in between. So I would take the turntable and like find the section I was trying to maybe hear what the drummer was doing specifically. And I would just, drop the needle down in that general area on the record. And then, you could you could not have the platter moving. So it's not spinning, but the stylus is active, so you could hear it. And so then I would just, take my finger and into the center of the disc, I would just slowly start spinning it. And that way it was variable. I could kind of do it a little faster, than what the preset speeds were. And I could kind of hear that it was going, you could kind of like, which is a lot better than, and you're like, what was that?
Right.
What just happened? So that was like, I mean, that's what was available. There wasn't YouTube, and they're just the little stereo tape deck that we had didn't have vari-speed on it. That would have been a way I could have slowed it down without it going right down into the mud. But yeah, so that's what I would do. I would just sit there and just play that one little thing I was trying to get over and over, and just spin it by hand until I could kind of go, yeah, I think it's this maybe. Then you go to the drums and try to figure it out. So yeah, like that was that moment where it was before the digital technology. That would have been whatever, mid 70s, I guess, for me. But that's how I would do it.
Yeah, and I started out with trackers. So, and it was all software. So I didn't have any money back in those days at all, and even just to buy this tracker, which was like $50, seemed like a lot of money. But the biggest game changer was switching over to Reason and having a more, I guess, what we would consider a DAW today, and having that kind of workflow. And I learned synthesis from the Maelstrom and the subtractive synthesizer in Reason. So I actually got into hardware later. It started all in the box, So just having those tools available when I started was super helpful. And then nowadays you have YouTube to help teach you stuff. Like if you don't know how to do something or you're interested in something, YouTube is a huge resource. Because back in the day, I think we were talking about this a little bit before the show. When I started buying hardware synths, I didn't know what to buy. So I relied on the guys at Sonic State and some of the stuff they were producing. There was another channel called GearWire that I used to watch, some of their content, just to kind of get an idea, because I didn't know anything other than these soft synths that were built into Reason, really. So I relied a lot on YouTube, basically, in the beginning as well, for to teach me like what was good. And then going out and trying to and buying some of these instruments and trying them out. So,
yeah. Well, when I get into guitar, because I had played a little bit of saxophone in the late '80s, but in the early '90s, with getting into guitar, it was tape cassette. And rewinding, although once I got a CD player, it seemed like things were a little bit easier to do it. But it was like what Tim, what you were saying about, like, you'd rewind it, except I didn't have the very speed, so I would just have to listen to it over and over and like, what's that note to that riff, and to try to grab it. Now, my dad had a turntable, but that was used. I did listen to albums on the turntable on the big speakers out in the living room, but mostly it was used for going backwards.
Yes,
we live for Satan, he will give you 666 and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's some messages in here somewhere. But yeah, it was mostly the tape cassette machine, and finding like reliable transcriptions was very difficult. And so I'd gotten like really early on a book that had chords to Beatles songs. Mind you, I was just starting out. I mean, a lot of the chords I had to learn to be able to play the songs, and even at that point, I'm like, some of these chords are wrong, And so after a while, like, I just had to get better, but like by ear, basically, and then writing in the book like, that's not the right chord. This is what it should be. This matches what's on the album. And I don't know who was doing these transcriptions, but I don't think they were sober. So that was always a really difficult thing. And they're mostly, you'd get lucky if they actually had some chord charts in there, because a lot of times it was just like, regular, like, notation, like, or therefore piano. You're like, I just need the chords, but you'd have to kind of dig through this stuff to try to get something that was usable. And tab stuff, I didn't see that for a while, and when tab books started coming out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, this is going to make my life a lot easier. But even in those, like, I would sit down like, okay, I finally got some. I mean, I had worked out a lot of my favorite classic rock songs by ear, but there were some parts that, like, I wanted to work on where they were fast, and I want to see how they were played. And oftentimes the transcriptions were not that accurate. They were played on a different part of the guitar, or they just kind of missed the feel or the notes of it or whatever. So that was always kind of tough. But by the 90s, at least, it was, there were all these VHS cassettes of, what was those videos, like Starlicks, I think? Which, as a 14-year-old kid or whatever, I didn't really have the money to buy those. So unfortunately, those weren't much help to me. I wish I could have had some material like that because, at least I remember there for guitars, bass, and drums at least, and I imagine there was stuff for keyboards as well, but there were a couple companies that were making like really low budget instructional videos about how to play a certain style or certain songs, and then you could see somebody playing it, and there would be some sort of what was that called? I forget the name of it, but they would have the transcription, and it would be scrolling along the bottom of the video. But there was what's that technology? I can't remember.
You're talking about like when you had to go to the music store and buy an actual like VHS cassette.
Yeah. I mean, you would take it home, and it would be some guy, and there were some cool ones done by, the musicians that made the music, because there was a lot of them that were people were like, well, here's what Jimmy Page would play or whatever, but. I remember, and actually a lot of these are available on YouTube now, so you could go back and find Brian May, talking about his guitar parts from the early 80s, or Eric Johnson, or Brian Setzer, guys like that actually playing their music, and those are the most helpful because they played it correctly because it was their song. But yeah, there was, I didn't have money for lessons, so self-taught, and you just couldn't find a lot of information, had no internet. So, and then once the internet hit, again, it took a while before there were really good materials like there are now.
And then what about like the way gear has changed and facilitates different, things that you can do with it, and it kind of facilitates what you do with it. Like, how can we hit on that a little bit, gents? Like what? Like Marshall, I would think you would be like king of this.
The big thing for me was when they started putting out analog synthesizers again. That I thought was the coolest thing. Getting a Moog Little Fatty, I was like, holy crap, this thing's amazing. You know what I mean? The digital stuff was cool, but it didn't. The early VAs and stuff, they have their aliasing issues and other problems like that. But you get an analog synth, and man, it's just like a whole other realm to be in at the time. So now we're spoiled for choice with all that stuff. But back in the early 2000s, there wasn't too many that you could get that I can recall. I think the Andromeda was the first like polyphonic analog synth in like a long time when that came out, because everything was digital before then, like most through the 90s and everything. Unless anyone knows of anything else, I can't think of anything that came out in the 90s that was analog, polyphonic. So just having the ability to get a hold of some analog synthesizers was a big deal.
And that's interesting that you use the software version of those. Kind of to learn how to get around, and then once you had the real thing, you already knew what to do. Yeah,
I kind of felt like, especially when I got the Mini Moog, I was like, this is like an old friend, because Arturia had their little Mini Moog V plugin that I used to use quite a bit, and it sounded completely different, but like I knew what all the stuff did,
Right. Chris, what about for you? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, the amazing thing for how my gear evolution has gone has just been the amounts of different things I can stick my nose into. It's just facilitated so many different endeavors that I feel brave enough to do, that I don't think I could have ever done before. And even just as simple as having Pro Tools or something like that, where you can load video in, and then actually, you could do a score and it's locked to some kind of time code, right? It's locked to time code. So I mean, that just opened up all kinds of possibilities that never existed for me before, let alone maybe the instruments that I could have inside of Pro Tools. Leisure Suit Larry does synths. What the heck? I don't know what that is, but I love it. I hope it's a baby blue leisure suit.
Oh.
The finest color for leisure suits. But yeah, like just the braveness, it's the courage it's given me, just to kind of go, I could probably like tackle, just about anything just because of the technology and the gear now and the evolution that it's gone through. That's a big thing to me. That's really a big thing. Like, I feel like I could kind of get under the hood of just about anything if I had the time to sort of study it for a couple of seconds. So that's incredibly exciting for me.
So obviously in terms of recording and synthesizers, big changes in the way that you do things, Tim, but what about for drums in particular? Has technology changed? Obviously, electronic drums have become a thing, but in terms of acoustic drums, has much changed in acoustic drums or periphery that has made it any sort of impact over the years on your use of them?
That's a great question. Absolutely, in a lot of different ways. I mean, clearly it's not as revolutionized as something that's software based, because that's got so much more headroom for change, basically, right? Mm-hmm. But because drums are going to be some sort of shell with a membrane stretched across it that you hit, and that by definition that's what it's going to be. So, but yeah, I mean, absolutely in portability, in types of shells that you can find now, all the way down to maybe something as sort of superficial in a way, though, as just like exotic wood veneers and whatnot that you can get. Like, it's amazing just what's available. Incredible. And all of those affect sound, some of them in subtle ways and some of them in drastic ways. But the fact that you can pretty much have any kind of wood drum that you like and any sort of plywood shell configuration that you can dream up can be made now, which is just incredible. And then drum heads themselves, like, depending on what you're doing, if you're playing sort of a light, let's say a lighter hitting jazz gig or something, then you go for like a thinner head. It's not going to last as long, but you're not beating the living bejesus out of it either, so it doesn't have to. And because it's lighter, it's thinner, right? Fewer plies there as well. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes just one with a coating or even no coating. So now you've got like a different tonal ability there, right? So, I mean, it's incredible. Just all of those little things add up in so many ways. And I would have to say, like, hardware-wise, God, things have come leaps and bounds. It's incredible. Paul was asking a question, how many snares do I have? Around the order of about 26, probably. Some of them are old and vintage, some of them are new. The answer is not enough, right? Yeah. Yep, that's true.
But would the snare be the most interchanged piece of your normal kit? By
far. That's a song-to-song thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every song's going to have like a different snare. I mean, if it needs it, obviously it doesn't have to, but that's the first thing I'm thinking is like, what's going to be the coolest snare? Is it going to be something low-pitched or dead, or something high-pitched and ringy, and like what works? So, yeah, that's right. It's definitely the most interchanged piece. And then a lot of times the other thing is like what I'm using to hit with. The sticks I'm using, or if I'm using brushes, or if I'm using a bundle of dowel rods, little wooden dowels. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to get texture and timbre out of what you're using to hit with. Also, which is kind of a newer thing, like brushes have been around for a while, sticks, but like having like plastic dowels and stuff that you could have with adjustable fan on it, so you can, it could be more of a broader hit or like something focused. If you can tighten it up. So I mean, it's pretty cool. Like it's changed a lot, but still you're still dealing with an instrument that you're hitting that's got a membrane stretched across it. It's just that now you can get like a million different kinds of membranes with all kinds of different things to hit with different shell configurations, and then hardware that, for one thing, doesn't break every year is kind of nice. It's just so heavy duty, and the engineering is so specific, with aircraft kind of tolerances. It's amazing. And I'll brag on Drum Workshop again, just because it's amazing what the kinds of technologies that they have, and they found all the things that sucked about, the original hardware and changed it. I mean, even down to things like having stands have a hydraulic power for them. So which doesn't seem like that big a deal, but when you're sitting behind a kit and then you're reaching forward and you're trying to get leverage and then raise something up like this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it has a little hydraulic thing, it raises on its own, man, and stops. And it's just little innovations like that they're pretty life-changing for the drummer.
I just like coming across some vintage like snare drum stands, like the difference in the build of something like a snare stand has changed radically, where modern hardware is so big and chunky, and it weighs a lot more, it doesn't tip over,
Right.
There's a lot more substance to it compared to this like little rickety thing that holds a snare.
I think it's really kind of evolved with the music too for that. People weren't really playing metal, back in the early 60s, so they didn't really need something that could stand up to that punishment, but that is some punishment, man, if you're playing metal and nice and hard like that. So it's got to be able to take it.
Yeah, imagine, the strength that you would have, hitting your snare like this versus, a metal drummer that's just like pounding it out like this. It's going to be quite a bit different.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think for me, the funny thing is that the guitar technology hasn't. I mean, there are some specific places where it's moved forward, but I really think that in the last 30-something years, it's more been about refinement, like to the extreme, and especially, the 90s brought back the classic stuff from the 60s and 50s, and basically the modern stuff just kind of was trying to get its head out of, the 80s technology and kind of get back more to tone, but then how do we move forward and do both technology and really good tone? And I mean, as far as guitars and amps and stuff, there's not many changes. Not many things are radically different. And my amps are, I've got a lot of old amps. There's a '68 Bandmaster behind me. Got some, and a '65 Standell, and the technology between that and something modern like my Top Hat and Soldano are not that big. Same thing with the guitars. I mean, I play Strats and Gretches and SGs and whatnot that are built like basically were in the 50s and 60s. So in that regards, nothing changed. One thing that has, I think, become a lot better for beginners is that, budget level instruments have become better. And I think that's a really big deal. I mean, you can still find crappy ones, but like I'm talking your basic, you go into Guitar Center and you buy that like cardboard kit that has a guitar and a little amp and a strap and picks and strings and stuff in it. That kind of thing that, parents are buying for their kids to get into an instrument is a heck of a lot better than it was in the early 90s. And I went from an old hand-me-down guitar, and I totally skipped all that stuff because it was junk. I played friends' Squier Strats that were horrible, and I just waited and worked and saved till I could buy an American one. But that was a pain in the butt, and especially if you're learning, like it's hard to learn on a guitar that doesn't play well, and my first guitar didn't. So I think these days that's that's made a big difference for beginners, along with like what we were talking about with the access to information for how to play stuff, how to play an instrument with YouTube and all of that. So as far as guitars, it's mainly been a refinement. I mean, digital technology has made things easier. It doesn't impact my rig a whole lot because, in the 90s I had a digital delay, and I have a digital delay now, and I have analog delays, and it's all pretty basically the same stuff, I guess. With some of these pedals like Strymon or those UAD pedals, again, they're just refinements on existing technology. And they don't really radically change the workflow. I think where workflow has changed for me is definitely in the recording sphere. And that's the area of playing that has, or making music, that's really changed a lot from when I began. And, the first thing I recorded onto was a tape machine, a reel-to-reel. And then I had the Tascam 424, like 4-track. And at some point I told you guys about taking a music production class in college, and whatever it was, digital performer or whatever, using stuff like that. But that was in a class, and it was really cool, but I didn't have a computer at that time. And again, these are the days before computers were ubiquitous. So like once I got, I'd been living on my own for a while, and finally got a computer like in the early 2000s for myself, because I think my parents had maybe bought one before I moved out. But that didn't do me any good. So being able to record on a computer was a big deal, especially when I got my first Mac, because I think GarageBand came out not too long after, within a year or two or something. And so that opened a lot of possibilities for me for free right away. And then all the stuff that came with it was amazing. And then when I made the bump up to Logic to be able to do stuff at home, that was a game changer for me, because I kind of just, anybody that started making music a long time ago now, I had to deal with tapes and things like that, and degradation and bouncing and all that kind of stuff, which is great to have experience on. But to be honest, like when, it's just a lot better to make music digitally. It's a hell of a lot easier, and it's, a lot less expensive too to get started. And for somebody that already has, say like a MacBook or something, to get Logic for $200, you're set. And for many years, I barely had any third-party plugins. I bought very, very few. And mostly it was just digging into what Logic had. And I was like, oh, I wonder if it has this. And I'd look through the plugins like, hey, cool, it has this. Awesome. Let me see if I can use it. Things like that. That really blew my mind.
Yeah, that might be the single biggest thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really changed so much.
Yeah, because I mean, synthesizers have a lot of technological changes, but really how you use hardware synths themselves, like as a package, it's not a really big deal. I mean, I could set up the Moog 1 and use it like it's a mini Moog, and it's not really any different. You run some output cables into whatever you're recording, and you press the keys, and then it is. But some of these other things, like with recording, have been a lot bigger technological advances, or have changed the way we do things a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, being able to record at home and multi-track and get professional quality was a big deal back then. And there were all kind of debates when I started whether or not mixing in the box was any good. There were people that, get it away. They hated it, but it was the future even then. So
yeah. What about in your journeys? I think we would all agree that the changes in music technology and what's available have almost entirely been good. We have access to so many more things than we used to. We have all these choices that we didn't used to have. It's easier. It's less expensive. But has there been any downsides for you guys as far as things have changed compared to when you started? Is there anything that when you think back, you're like, that was a little bit easier back in the day, or I got more done, or something like that? What would you guys say?
No, I think it's all as things have progressed through time. It's gotten better. I don't really have any downsides other than I have way too much gear probably, but I don't think that's a negative. But
I mean, I'd agree if I'm up next. Yeah, there are, I see it this way. There are downsides, I guess, to every upside. There is another side to the coin where there's something about it that's a little like, that's probably not the same quality, or that workflow's a little bizarro, depending. But it kind of depends on where you come from too, like, and what you know, right? So there's that. But for the most part, yeah, technology has advanced things to a really, really cool spot and afforded us the ability to do things that no way we could have done before. And so that's always a positive, and it's really just how you use the technology anyway. But yeah, I can't really think of anything that's been too negative. I mean, at first, talking about like not having a second to let your ears reset when you're doing a mix at the, like, if you're actually mixing in a linear fashion at the end of the mix, if you're on tape, say, there's a moment where there's a few seconds where it has to rewind, and your ears can kind of like get 2 seconds of a break, whereas you can shove it right up your backside, obviously, with just put it on loop. But then again, you can also just do it piece at a time. You don't have to do it linearly, so you're saving a lot of time right there, saving some ear fatigue. I think everything, there's just like two sides to every viewpoint. I think for every negative, there's definitely positive, and I don't even really see that many negatives, frankly. But like maybe just again, if you're old school and thinking, of those kind of technologies, I'm sure it was, in some ways they think it's not as good. But I don't know. I'm with Marshall on that one. How about you?
So I was thinking about one this week, but let me first hit the one from the chat because Aaron and Mr. Cowfood brought it up, which would be decision paralysis forces us to figure out why we do what we do. Which, if you actually sit and try to figure it out, it can be a good thing. Of course, Mr. Cowfood, too many choices can be paralyzing. So. The paralysis I talked about from having too many choices. That's something that I hear from a lot of musicians. I think that's like one of the biggest problems in the music community is that when you get so much stuff, and because say we can buy these $29 plugins and amass hordes of them, then it becomes, which one am I going to use? Which one am I going to use? And that can be something that's difficult for a lot of people. For me, like I don't feel like I have those problems. I tend to, if I have a lot of stuff and I'm in the moment recording, I go to the thing that I know, even if I have 10 of those things. And so if it's not time for me to make a decision about what other one I'm going to use, I'm always go to that one. And so I think I kind of get around that one. At least that's the way that I get around it. I don't find myself, being kind of stuck in that. Now, one area that I felt a little bit stuck in that would be maybe similar because, again, we have so many things and so many options and so much music technology. So, when I get a new guitar, it's what you play it for a couple of minutes. Like, yeah, I know what this does. This is the volume knob. This is the pickup selector. This is the tone knob. It's got 6 strings. Okay, it's a different brand. The neck shape is different. The pickups are different. It still plays like a guitar. It still sounds like a guitar. I still use all the information that I already have. And as far as the feel of it, you'll get your muscle memory will get used to it really quickly. no big deal. So like, buying a guitar, even buying an amplifier, you're like, yeah, I know what a volume knob does. I know what a, treble and bass knobs do. Okay. Yeah. Not a big deal. But the more and more you get into different technologies, and I think this is one area where synthesizers are a lot more diverse, and that their technological workflow tend to vary a lot more than, say, guitars, basses, and drums. And so there is often a bit of a learning curve in new gear in terms of synthesizers, in terms of recording gear and plugins too. Like, there takes a little more time to really get into it and do it. And one of the downsides, which again is something that's totally solvable, and it's not a problem that it's forced upon us. It's just like the paralysis, decision paralysis. Like, you can get around it if you just work on it. And so one thing that I was kind of stuck at, not really stuck, but I just, hadn't gotten around to it, is, like, there's so many cool things being released, and NAMM's coming up, and this last week, like, I haven't, for the last few weeks, I haven't been able to do a lot physically. And so I decided that I would spend time in getting to working more in Logic, learning more about Logic. And so one of the goals that I set for myself, since I could sit pretty still, I didn't need to lift anything or look down or play any instruments or anything. I could just do everything with the trackpad. And the thing that I wanted to learn was Drum Machine Designer in there. And so they've got this incredible thing that's fairly new to Logic called Drum Machine Designer. And it's you can manipulate samples. You can bring in. It's got also a software synthesizer drum elements. You can mix all those two together to make custom drum kits, and then apply plugins and everything all in this one plugin within Logic that comes in it. And it's a really amazing plugin. And I've used it, but I have not really gotten to know it, and I've not built any custom kits. And so when I went to build this custom kit, I'm like, okay, it's got all sorts of awesome stuff in there. It's got your 808s and your 909s and the Linn drums and all this stuff, and all their, proprietary kits, and like, it's cool. And for different styles. All right, I need to build a kit. And so for me, again, I am a drum owner, and I can play a little bit of drums, but I'm not a drummer. So when it comes to guitars, bass, and synthesizers, I'm like, I know what I like. And when I hear it, I know what I like. Well, with drums, like, yeah, I have some opinions, but I'm not strongly opinionated, and I don't have, the intense ear that you have, Tim, for drums. And so as I was going through, like, lists of hundreds of snares to pick from to build my custom kit, I'm like, oh man, what if I pick the wrong one? What if I pick one that doesn't match the kick very well? Or what if and I started going through this, and I was going through it, and I was doing it, but it was kind of similar to the decision paralysis. I was picking stuff. I was like, I wasn't just giving up and going, I don't know what to do, I'm not going to do it. But it made me realize something about all of this, that because we have so much options, we have to at times stop with the new and then just focus on what we have to really work with it. And because I don't have to do that as much lately, I felt like a little bit stuck in it. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this doesn't feel right. Like, because I've been a musician for a long time, and I know how to do all this stuff. And so, when it came to doing this, I felt like, what if I make mistakes and it's not the thing that's super awesome? Like, this is not any different than anything I've ever done before. The thing is that I had years that I made all the mistakes, and I tried all the different pedals with guitar, and I tried different synthesizers, and I've already done all this stuff over the course of years. I'm now expecting myself to sit down with Drum Machine Designer and go, this is the snare that I want, and I'm going to pitch it down 2 semitones, and it's going to be perfect. Like, no, that comes with experience, and I didn't have the experience with it. So that was a downside for me, that I in the moment got stuck and realized, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to sit down. It's a problem, but it's a problem that's easily gotten past.
And that's why they have the memes about your snare sounds like
Yeah.
shit.
Right.
Now we're all worried about it, except for
Yeah.
Tim.
Oh, I have to worry about it too. A lot.
So, so Paul says, so I'm hearing is Cryss really doesn't like designing drums. Actually, well, in the past I would have said that was true, but like that project that we worked on with the sequential stuff, and Tim had done all the drum patterns and all that kind of stuff, and had sent over some sample stuff. And then I got to use a vintage '80s sequential tom and a DSI Tempest to create the sounds, and I was going through those, but it was a little bit smaller of a pool to draw from, so I actually did really enjoy going through it and tweaking it out. But yeah, it's a kind of the thing that I gotta spend a little more time with. But yeah, it was fun. Well, we are drawing to a close, and let's just take a couple minutes to kind of catch up as far as what everybody's been doing. Actually, mine's pretty short, but to find out what you guys have been doing the last couple weeks and what you got coming up. Marshall, start us off.
Yeah, I've been really diving into my live rig, trying to get the additional tracks going, and trying to figure out. Like, I've run into a few little issues, like some timing stuff. Like I realized the V-Synth takes forever to switch patches, so trying to figure out how to time stuff to where it switches at the right point, and those kind of things. Those are some little technical challenges I'm working through. But yeah, I'm excited with what I'm making, and hopefully I can have some updates on that pretty soon.
Gigs. I want to hear about gigs.
Yeah. Can't wait.
I think the first thing that you do live, I need to try to get a plane ticket and come see you, man. It would be a blast.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That'd be a blast. Try to make
far
that
apart
happen.
are you guys? About 500-600 miles or so?
It's probably about right.
Yeah.
It might be a little more than that. Yeah, maybe 600. Sounds about right. It's not that far. I don't think it's by plane, probably 4 hours or something. No, it's not even that. I bet it's 2.5 or something.
I'm Googling it.
Yeah, it's not too far apart. Well, just keep me informed.
Well, yeah.
You bet.
700 miles.
Okay, 700.
Okay, yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
bad.
so it's a couple hours
Yeah.
by plane. No big deal. Yeah, man. I want to know about that. My scene has just been kind of juggling the same things that I do. I mean, I got a chance to play the Grand Ole Opry twice in the last couple of weeks. My original band went out and played a live gig, and then before that, a couple weeks, I played a live solo synth gig that was really fun. And then I got this horror film, the short 10-minute horror film, but nonetheless, lots of choices to make there in scoring that. So those are kind of what's been on my plate, and what's on my plate until the end of the month will be that film. And then beyond that, I'm running a residency for the local synth community here in Nashville. So every one Sunday a month, I'm putting together a show for that, and I'm curating the artists, and I'm hosting it and going down to the club and announcing everybody. And so I got my hands full on a few different things. But
Awesome.
just as psycho of a collection of stuff is what suits me probably.
Have to get some Thru Port Collective advertising on those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's keeping both of you guys pretty busy. I've since my surgery, what was it, 3 weeks ago? So there was definitely some time where I just really wasn't doing anything. And then in the evenings, slowly been like just picking up the guitar. And so I've been trying to play, and also I do need to like use my left arm more. So that guitar has been great for that. And I feel like I'm starting, like this week, I feel like I'm starting to make some progress and that things are feeling a little more comfortable, and like even playing stuff feels better. And I've my post-op visit, like my weight limit is increased so that I'm able to do a lot more around the house. I still can't lift real heavy stuff, so there's things I can't do in here. I can't even lift my amps. But yeah, at least I can start getting some stuff done. And again, one of those projects was just working in Logic. So I found a great, like, there's a YouTube channel called Music Tech Help Guy that it's a recording engineer that does a lot of work, just does a lot of tutorial videos with Logic. And so he just had started the series a few months ago or something that was about, just, 10 to 20 minute episodes about certain aspects of it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch these. I've been using Logic for years, and some of the videos in the beginning, I'm like, okay, I know how to do this stuff. But in one of those videos, it's like, oh, you can do this. There's this shortcut, and it does this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this would have saved me so much time. And so then it really impressed upon me, like, all right, I need to go through all 50 videos now and just make this a discipline that this year I'm going to get some of those cobweb corners swept out and really learn some more aspects about Logic, because that would really help my workflow far better than getting a new plugin or anything else. Not to say that I won't do that, but I'm just saying that, like, as far as things that would make a difference. And I'm in a place where right now I don't have gigs and I don't have any other responsibilities. I'm not making video, so I can really focus on this little thing, and it doesn't look like I'm being productive, and sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm being productive, but I think that it's going to make a big difference for me. So yeah, we're just going to keep that up and hanging out with you guys on Wednesdays.
Nice.
I was glad to see you back, Cryss, and that you're doing better, and that's really good news.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking with you guys and great hanging out with everybody. If you haven't done it, the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We always need more topics for what we're talking about here. And the best way to do that would be to join our Facebook group and make a post about the topic you want to talk about and get everybody involved. And maybe that would be something that would, if we find some good topics, that would be opportunities to work it into a show. So love to join us during the week through Port Collective on Facebook. And we'll be back next Wednesday. I think in two Wednesdays we got a really interesting guest. So we'll tell you all about that next week. So anyways, everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next time.